This design for the Golden Dome will integrate with our existing defense capabilities and should be fully operational before the end of my term. So we'll have it done in about 3 years. Once fully constructed, the Golden Dome will be capable of intercepting missiles even if they are launched from other sides of the world and even if they are launched from space. And this is the one I was really looking forward to this day, because this is very important for the success and even survival of our country. It's a pretty evil world out there, so this is something that goes a long way toward the survival of this great country. And as I said, we'll be discussing Canada. They want to hook in and they want to see if they can be a part of it.
The survival of America, according to President Trump. That's from the Oval Office just a number of days ago, where he's announcing the Golden Dome, a kind of a skiff off this Iron Dome in Israel, which we had a hand in working on and actually helped it to this day. But he's saying that America is going to be safe now. We don't have to worry about anything else. And because we've had a number of times on anything about the Iron Dome itself or missile defense, air defense, our go-to guy is Professor Ted Postol, former MIT professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And so, first of all, Ted, it's been a while since you've been on, so welcome back.
Nice to be back. Although I think it seems that the reason for me being back is because there's more nonsense to be explained.
Well, it does. Public. I don't know. Just for your defense, almost all the stuff we bring on is because nonsense is going on somewhere. So you're in good company with that. There's a lot to choose from. But listen, on this specific one, it's kind of a big deal because everyone was talking about. Back in my day, back in the 80s and stuff, we had Reagan come up with Star Wars, and we're going to have this integrated missile defense shield and all this great stuff, a strategic defense initiative, et cetera, which ended up coming to nothing. But now then, and Trump actually referred to that and said, Reagan tried it back then and it didn't work because the technology wasn't there, but now it is. So first of all, I just kind of like your view at the 30,000 foot level. Is the technology there now?
No, not at all. There's the basic same technology limitations exist today that existed then. There are advances in technology, of course, but none of these advances bring the technology close to what it needs to be. So, for example, lasers, laser energy densities have advanced, but when you're thousands of times too short of what you need to do, like we were in the 1980s, what does it matter that you're still thousands of times short for what you need to do? But
I know you spent a lot of time working in the past in various capacities with the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, et cetera. Did you ever have in your history any interaction at all with the SDI?
Oh, I had substantial interactions with the SDI. I was a primary advisor to the Chief of Naval Operations when the SDI was proposed. And in fact, there's an interesting story about the situation. As in March 4, I remember even the date, March 4, 1984, I think it was. I'm sitting with a beer in front of my television, and the president goes on the television and he starts talking about this missile defense proposal, this strategic defense initiative. And I had been following the technology developments in that area, so I was not uninformed at all. And I said, what the hell's going on here? And the next day when I came in the Pentagon, there was our senior captain in our division, Linton Brooks. He then went on to become a Navy admiral and then a U.S. ambassador, both of which he did as badly as he did the job.
Oh man, this story isn't going anywhere good.
And Brooks was kind of dancing around this main bay where we had a whole bunch of these, petty officers sitting at their desks with television, with computer screens in front of them because they're working. And I just yelled across the room at him. I said, Linton, how are you going to do this? Because he was dancing around the room and he was saying, we're going to defend lives, not avenge them. This was his big contribution. It turned out, I later found out, he had arranged for Edward Teller to meet. Edward Teller met with him. I actually think he didn't actually meet with the chief, but Teller told him about this device called the X-ray laser, which never really worked. In fact, the experiments they did, they made mistakes in the measurements, and it actually never functioned. And Livermore and Teller went and told Brooks that they were going to be able to shoot down, all of Russian ICBMs with these X-ray lasers. And, he was talking fiction. He had no idea what was going on.
Let me ask you a question, because I had categorically a similar experience during my time in the Future Combat Systems at Fort Bliss, Texas, when it was supposed to be the system of systems. It was going to revolutionize ground combat and all that kind of stuff. And when I got into the program, I had some direct, tank-on-tank maneuver battle warfare experience in Iraq. So I knew, the general ideas about how things work and how they worked in practice in terms of, in comparison to the theoretical. So all this stuff obviously is the future. So we're projecting what it's going to be like. And there was one particular simulation exercise that I remember did, where I was taking part as as one of the cavalry commanders of a certain group inside this big thing here. And the way the simulation was written and the computer code and all that kind of stuff, it gave capabilities to the platforms that I had there, which were not real. I knew they weren't real because I was in a cavalry actual
you knew about it.
and so I saw these things being projected on here. And of course, in the context of the game with the other players and the computer, it came out that the other side won because of all this so-called technology that they had on their side. And I told my commander at the time, I said, I'm really worried when these guys brief this stuff to the general that they're going to make it sound like that this proved that it worked, when there's no way in God's earth it would ever function that way. And he says, no, I give the general a little bit of credit. He's not that dumb. Well, it turns out I sat in on that briefing, and sure enough, the gamers, the guys who were the civilians who were in charge of the game, gave him the results and said, this proves the technology worked. And so they made purchase decisions and buying decisions on the belief that it worked, even though I knew that it didn't. But the general didn't know that. I think he should have, but that's a separate issue. But that general thought that it really would work, and so he went forward with it. The program was eventually canceled in 2009 because of the very things that I pointed out, because eventually you can't hide that. Was it something similar with the Reagan SDI? And by extension, it could be the same with Trump here. Did Reagan actually think that this stuff would work?
My experience was similar to yours, except probably worse. What happened is Brooks misinformed the chief of naval operations, misleading him to believe that there was this revolutionary new technology. And the chief, without consulting with his scientific advisors, I wasn't the only advisor. It was, the Navy probably has more science advising capacity than most nation states. And without checking with anybody, he ran off to Ronald Reagan and told Ronald Reagan, proposed the idea of the Strategic Defense Initiative. So this came from the Chief of Naval Operations. This came from my boss, even though when the president made this speech, which was, of course, after my boss had already gone to the president, and Linton Brooks had misinformed my boss, and all this circus, if you want to call it, use a bit dignified term for it, all this circus had occurred. We went off into a hallucinatory policy. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And all hell broke loose in the Pentagon. When I was in the Pentagon, um, uh, my attitudes toward the system, individuals, of course, you judge each individual by their merits or lack of merit. But I lost all respect for the whole Pentagon decision making apparatus at that point. My attitude at the time before this strategic defense initiative was, look, I have very different judgments. I knew that my judgments were different from what a lot of people thought. But my attitude was, well, these are responsible professionals. If they're being responsible, you can disagree with them, but you can't fault them for being reckless. But when I saw the way the whole Pentagon lit up and people were running around like this guy Brooks was, and he was not the only one by any stretch of the imagination, I said, these people are dangerous. They have no idea what they're doing. And I saw all kinds of people at the assistant secretary levels and the deputy secretary level, just run around making outrageous claims about technologies that didn't exist. It just went right to the top of the Pentagon.
And so this was 1984, you say, right?
Right. So, Weinberger was the Secretary of Defense at the time, and he was totally uninformed about this is actually a story. The X-ray laser was the thing that started the whole the idea that you would use X-rays from a nuclear power source to create beams of X-rays that are so powerful that they would propagate thousands of kilometers, so millions of meters. And when the X-rays impinged on the outer surface of a rocket, the X-rays get absorbed in a very thin layer of material. And it's just, there's a lot of energy that gets absorbed into the thin layer of material. The outer layer just explodes because there's so much energy, so much heat such a high temperature generated.
That's the theory.
So that was the theory. So I was going to brief after the chief had already gone to the president. I had the experience of having to brief the chief about the X-ray laser because so I had these slides from Livermore. Livermore was the big promoter of the X-ray laser, a device that they misunderstood. That it actually had never worked in the tests that they ran. And the slides had little cylindrical objects and beams coming out of the cylindrical object of the cylinders. And, it was cartoons and then rockets rising and rockets being, exploding. So I said to myself, this is misleading. So, at that time I didn't have all the computer graphics available to me. It was the 80s. So I had slides. So I would be making slides with a Xerox machine, So the first thing I did was I took a slide with the cylinder on it, and I erased the cylinder, and I replaced it with the cartoon of an explosion. Just multicolored flash. And then so I take this and I'm talking to the chief, and I say, well, here is this X-ray laser device, and I put down this slide with a cylindrical picture, and and I've erased the beams coming out of the X-ray laser, and rockets are rising, and I say, well, this device is supposed to be able to destroy these missiles So basically what happens, and I put a new slide down, and I have this explosion icon. So you don't see anything but the explosion and the beams coming out. And this has actually occurred. This has actually occurred. The chief says to me, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, sir, it's a nuclear explosion." And he says to me, "Nuclear explosion?"
Oh,
I say,
Lord.
"Well, sir, the X-ray laser generates the X-rays that it needs to direct through these lasing rods with a nuclear explosion. That's the only place the only way you can get the energy you need, energy density you need to generate the X-rays that are so intense." He says again, "Nuclear explosion?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And then we went on from there. He didn't know that the X-ray laser got its energy for shooting down, if it worked, which it didn't, but it got its source of X-rays that it was going to be used to shoot down these missiles from a nuclear explosion in space. It turned out, I found out through another source, that neither did Ronald Reagan and neither did Caspar Weinberger, the Secretary of Defense. So
Well,
they had all been told about this magical device, and somebody had neglected to tell them that you needed a nuclear explosion to actually
kind of a
generate
big
the
thing
X-ray source.
to omit. But it seems like this eerily similar today, because here is you saw Trump when he was reading that.
Yeah,
I mean, he's
yeah.
literally reading off of a chart, a spreadsheet of some sort. So he of course, has no independent idea what's on that chart or whether it's real or not. But then he was followed up by the Secretary of Defense.
Right.
This right here, the Golden Dome for America, is game changer. It's a generational investment in the security of America and Americans. Mr. President, you said we're to secure our southern border and get 100% operational control after the previous administration allowed an invasion of people into our country. President Reagan 40 years ago cast the vision for it. The technology wasn't there. Now it is, and you're following through to say we will protect the homeland from cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, drones, whether they're conventional or nuclear. It's not lost on me, sir, also that you had the vision to start the Space Force, and here we are when the others said we didn't need it. Here we are in the Oval Office with one of the leaders of the Space Force, in General Gutlein, leading the charge on putting in place a game-changing Golden Dome for America. So, sir, it's an honor to be a part of this bold initiative. We're going to get to work on it. We have been since you signed that executive order on January 27th. We've been fast forward on this. We're here on this day, and this is just one stop in delivering this defense of the homeland, which is something you've charged us with doing, and we'll keep going until it is complete, sir.
Thank you, Pete. Pete.
So those two guys that were sitting to his right, they kept on nodding every time, like, yeah, it can do all this stuff. There's an Air Force general out of the range of the camera on the other side of the president, presumably also nodding. And one has to wonder, is the Secretary of Defense as misinformed as just Caspar Weinberger back in the 1980s? Does he believe this? Do they not believe it? They're just going forward with it anyway? I don't know, but he literally claimed in there it would knock down everything. There's nothing that would be outside of it. And now the technology's there, he said. It wasn't in 84, but it is now. What say you?
Well, I don't even know how to, I'm at a loss for words. I mean, to call it a hallucination, it seems to me to be almost an understatement. It's like there's nothing there at all. Nothing. I mean, the emperor's new clothes is not adequate to describe what these guys are actually involved in. I mean, it's there's nothing there. Absolutely.
Let me play devil's advocate for a minute. What do you say when someone says, well, yeah, but you haven't been in the Pentagon since whatever day it is that you left, and in between then the technology may be there, so now they know something that you don't know? What do you say?
Well, science is a process that is advances at I won't say it can be unpredictable, but we know what radars can do We know what infrared sensors can do. We know what lasers can do. And none of these technologies have changed in any dramatic way relative to what they they were what I said earlier. If you're 10,000 times short of what you need to do, what's the matter? And now you're 9,999 times short of what you need to do. You still have nothing. And there's nothing secret that these guys know. The only secret is they know nothing. I mean, the secret is that these guys don't have a clue. It's your very prescient discussion about generals lying to the American people. These people knowingly and willfully lie to the American people. Or the only other possibility, which I can't imagine happening, is that they're so stupid that they'll believe anything.
Yeah, I'm not sure which of those options is the worst. I wonder if you could, because I know you have a presentation here. I wonder if you can kind of show us graphically why this is not going to work right now.
Well, one of the things, let me suggest I do two things, and then we'll see if that's good. I can quickly show you why the Golden Dome, to a first rough approximation, is a space-based system, which would be on satellites. Basically interceptors on satellites. They're talking about lasers and stuff, but that's even crazier than the interceptors. And the alternative is what you would call a expanding the ground-based missile defense system. So I can tell you, let me first focus on the expansion of the ground-based missile defense system, because that science says, basic science says, and we have 30 years of experience with this science, says that the missile defense systems we currently have no capability. And I can explain very briefly why they have no capability. And so expanding them will give us no capability, because 0 times 100 is 0, and 0 times 1,000 is 0. So, if you have no capability. So if you give me slide 4. These are just some diagrams of the interceptors that we use in the two missile defense systems the United States has put hundreds of billions of dollars of national treasure into. If we look at the two big interceptors on the left, these are called ground-based missile defense interceptors. They weigh about 50,000 pounds. We currently have about 44 of them deployed in Alaska. And they have a burnout speed of about 8 or 8.5 kilometers per second. I'll show you what that means shortly. And to the right, we have this Standard Missile 3, Block 2A, which weighs about 5,000. So it weighs about one-tenth the weight of the ground-based missile defense interceptors, and it can achieve a speed of about 4.5 kilometers per second. So if we go to the next slide, we can see a fictitious description of trajectories that each of these missiles could potentially follow. So if we look at the little red boats in the Atlantic, they launch these interceptors, and in principle, the little circles show you where the interceptor is at 1 minute intervals. So you can see after about 15 minutes after the launch from a boat, there's an intercept. Now, how would this intercept occur? The way the intercept would occur is that the interceptor, the actual kill vehicle, which is launched by the missile, has infrared imaging has an infrared imaging telescope. So it looks for the target that's arriving, and if it's going to actually hit the target, it lines the target up and can hit it. And if we look at the next slide, we can actually see an example from October of 1999 of a hit by the ground-based missile defense interceptor in a missile defense test. This is one of the very few successes they had, and what you're seeing in front of you is the actual image that the Missile Defense Agency published after the test. As we analyzed, we being my research group, analyzed these test data that they were publishing, they started publishing less and less and less data because we were analyzing the data and exposing lies that they were telling. So it's a very interesting process. But here they actually gave us an infrared image of the of this particular successful experiment. Now, if you look at the next slide, this is a simulation constructed by me of what the warhead looked like when it was half a second before it was struck by the interceptor. So the closing speed is roughly 15 kilometers per second, and so this image, given the resolution of the telescope, is viewed from 7 kilometers, half a second prior to intercept. So if you, as you can see, it would be very hard to find the actual preferred impact point and make the final adjustment. So this was a very lucky hit, from this particular test. So if we look at what the interceptor would actually see when it's a reasonable range, let's say 50 kilometers away, let's look at slide 8. It basically sees a point of light ahead of it, and it tries to adjust its lateral speed so that it's on a collision course with the target. So this is what General Kadish, who was also lying to the American public, he was in charge of the missile defense activities at the time, and he was lying because we have statements from him where he inadvertently indicated that he knew what he was saying was a lie. I can discuss that at some time if people are interested. So he was lying. So what General Kadish wanted the public to believe is that this is what the interceptor would see in combat. But if we look at slide 9, this is what the interceptor would actually see in combat, because it would see all these bright objects, all of which are decoys except one of these objects, and it would have to choose which of these objects is the warhead. And if there were 100 objects in front of it, which could readily be the case, it would have one chance in 100 of knowing which point of light was the warhead.
And you said that these are decoys. Is that the way enemy incoming missiles fire? They intentionally fire decoy warheads?
Oh, yeah. So if I look at slide 10 here, I can show you examples of decoys the United States has experimented with. The upper left decoy is a simple inflatable decoy that looks like a cone, which it does not have to look like, because the resolution of the telescope on the kill vehicle is so poor that any object of any shape will look like a credible target. On the right top, you see an inflatable erectable decoy that is supposed to mimic the Minuteman III warhead, and below is the Mark 12A Minuteman III actually reentry vehicle. So this decoy was invented with the fantasy that some adversary at some future time could actually image these decoys, which is not even close to the case, not close then and not close now.
And so, but let me ask you. So, I mean, you say that those are what did you say the material was it was made out of? The decoys.
Mylar, rubber.
So, how does the decoy like that move at the speed of?
Oh, I'm
15?
sorry. Very good question. Very good question. The decoy is deployed in space where the engagement has to occur. In space, there's no aerodynamic drag. So the decoy just travels along with the warhead, just as the warhead. So the decoy that might weigh 10 or 50 grams will travel along with a warhead that weighs 500 or 600 kilograms. No difference in their motion.
And
none
so
at all.
these are loaded up inside the attack rocket, whatever.
Yeah,
so
you would put them in the what's called the post boost vehicle, the vehicle from which the warheads are deployed. Let me just show you slide 11.
Fascinating. I never knew any of that.
Oh yeah, slide 11 shows you examples of other decoys that could be deployed. The leftmost decoy is a giant balloon. This giant balloon could contain a warhead. You could put the warhead inside a balloon and just inflate the balloon. And it would be a very bright object. And you would not know whether it was an upper rocket stage or whether it was just a balloon that was empty or if it was a balloon that contained a warhead. Other examples of balloons are shown in the middle and right images. And these things would all look like warheads. And in fact, the decoys that the Missile Defense Agency was experimenting with, of course, these were choreographed tests, were simple balloons. They had a 1 meter diameter balloon and a 10 meter diameter balloon. The bigger balloon was about 10 times brighter than the 1 meter diameter balloon. The only thing they could measure was the brightness of the object. They knew in advance that the brighter balloon was a bigger object. If they didn't know this, they wouldn't know it was bigger because you could coat it with a material that would make it brighter.
And I'm sorry,
they had no idea how to.
No, one of our viewers asked a question that I also had: is a warhead in a balloon? How is that? How do you get a warhead in a balloon?
Oh, you just have a little valve. You think of it as a flap valve, right? I mean, very simple speaking. Imagine I have a flap valve, and at the outside the flap valve, I have a little bottle of pressurized gas, and I release the gas, and the valve stem caves in, the balloon inflates, and then the pressure from the gas in the balloon causes the valve to close. There are all kinds of valves like this that we have all the time. Water valves, all kinds of things.
This is absolutely. I didn't know you could do it inside of a ballistic missile in space.
Yeah.
Though.
Think of
news to me.
Think of inflating a mattress. You have inflatable mattresses. How do you inflate it? How do you deflate the mattress? You typically have a valve and you push on the valve because the pressure is holding the valve in place, and the gas comes out.
I get that, but putting it in a balloon in space while there's a missile, that just seems
it's
really
easier
complicated.
in space because you don't need a lot of pressure to inflate a mattress. You need to put more pressure in the mattress than is in the air, so you're going to have more than 14.5 pounds per square inch.
So
Here,
sorry,
a fraction.
I know I'm getting off the topic here.
No. The point is, it's very easy to do.
The point gets back in though that if there's going to be an intercept missile, it's going to see a bunch of dots, not just one. It's the bottom line, right?
Right. So,
and is that the case for the assumed case anyway for like Russia or China if they had these kind of missiles?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who can launch a long-range ballistic missile with warheads on it can surely inflate a bunch of balloons and deploy them along with the warheads. I mean, this is, they could go out and buy mattresses and deploy them. you know, it, it could look like a Monty Python kind of.
Oh Lord.
So, so this is so easy to do. It's trivial. So if we expand these ground-based forces like Hegseth is talking about, we're going to have nothing. 0 times 200 is still going to be 0. 0 times 44 interceptors is still going to be 0. We're going to have no capability at all. So Mr. Hegseth has to describe in credible terms, not just sitting there and having an Air Force general who should be ashamed of himself for being there and nodding in support of this, because this Air Force general is supposed to be working for the security of this country, and this Air Force general is working is lying to the American people about a security capability that does not exist and will not exist.
So let me ask you, at least it was reported in the 1980s of the Reagan Star Wars issue, whatever, is that initially it's claimed the Soviets didn't know that we didn't have this technology, and that caused them to have to try to spin up and to try to figure out countermeasures, et cetera, until it was finally exposed as not working. First of all, was that the truth back then? And second of all, is there any chance that this version could be trying to just deceive the Russians or the Chinese into thinking, oh, well, we can't attack the United States anyway?
Well, I mean, deceive who? Yeah, Vladimir Putin is no fool. And Vladimir Putin has technical people who are definitely as skilled as I know some of these people. I've met them. I've actually sat and had dinner with them and talked about these issues with them. These guys are going to tell Putin exactly what I just told you. This is a fiction. This is nothing behind this. What Putin is worried about, and if you very carefully listen to what he's talking about, he's worried that somebody in a political leadership position in the West will be stupid enough and uninformed enough to think they actually have a capability and will do something that will start an action-reaction cycle that leads to the destruction of the world. That's what Putin's worried about. He's not worried that this thing is real. He's worried that the stupidity and the self-propagandizing of leadership in the West will cause an accident that would lead to an unstoppable escalation and destruction of civilization. That's what he's worried about. And I agree with him, because I saw firsthand. I saw firsthand these people run to the president and talk to him. The president did not even know that nuclear weapons had to be exploded in space for this crazy, unworkable idea. This idea that was experimentally failed, but the people who thought they were inventing this didn't know that it failed. That's how hallucinogenic this whole thing was. That's hard to believe, and we have the same thing going on now.
What other things on this presentation do you have here that it's important to know before we're running close on time here?
Okay, well, I think the other thing to know is that the space-based component, if you tried to build it, and if it worked at any level, would pose an extraordinary anti-satellite threat to all satellites that does not satellite threat that would not exist today. And what I mean by an anti-satellite threat, it would pose an anti-satellite threat that would threaten all GPS satellites, all the military navigation satellites, Russian GLONASS, all of the early warning satellites that are in geosynchronous orbit, all of the military communication satellites that are geosynchronous orbit. That threat does not exist today. It's not possible with the current missile defense systems on the ground to reach these higher altitudes. So the real problem is that putting all these satellites in space supposedly to intercept ballistic missiles will create, way before you have any kind of meaningful threat against the ballistic missiles, it will create a gigantic anti-satellite threat. So just to give you a sense of that, let me, why don't you just put up, Gary, jump to slide 21. Slide 21 shows, if you look at the lower southern edge of the world, as looking down from space, you'll see 3 dots of different colors. Those depict satellite battle stations that have an interceptor. Now, the interceptors, for reasons I can explain if we have time, but we should aim at the satellite because the satellite problem is more important. The interceptors would have about a 5 kilometer per second divert velocity in order to be able to attack ICBMs rising from the surface of the Earth. So you would need maybe a couple of thousands of satellites at maybe a 400 kilometer altitude, couple of thousand of these satellites, so that you would be able to intercept a single ICBM from anywhere on the surface of the Earth. If you want to be able to intercept 10 ICBMs from a close in, a clustered region of the Earth, you would then need 20,000 satellites. I can explain that shortly, but let me just show you what a few dozens of these satellites could do. So we're talking about dozens of satellites, not thousands of these satellites, could do to essentially all of the geosynchronous and navigational satellites that we have and Russia has and China has in space. Because if we launch a system like this, the Chinese and Russians might respond by launching a similar system because they would want to shoot down our system. So in this particular case, let's look at the green dots that start at the lower right corner next to the Earth's surface. And if we look at the transfer orbit of the green dots, it turns out that if we use 2 kilometers per second of the divert velocity in these interceptors that already have 5 kilometers per second, you could get to geosynchronous orbit in about 6 hours. And you can get to navigational orbits in about 3 hours or less, actually. So that's a very short warning time anti-satellite threat. Remember, if you have hundreds of these satellites in low Earth orbit, you could destroy everybody's satellites within a few hours. If we look at the red dots and we use more of the intercept velocity, in this case, 2.5 kilometers per second, so 50% of the velocity that's already in the interceptor, we would get to geosynchronous in less than 3 hours, 2.5 hours, and we would get to navigational satellite trajectories in about less than an hour and a half. That's how short warning. And of course, if we use the 5 kilometer per second capability, we could get to geosynchronous and basically, within an hour or so, and within a half an hour to geosynchronous to semi-synchronous orbit with the navigational satellite orbits. So if you look at what can be reached from the Earth, let's go to slide 27. I've just shown you the orbits that can be reached by the current ground-based missile defense system and the current sea-based 4.5 kilometer per second Standard Missile 3s. That's the lower left trajectory that can only get to about 15 or 1400 kilometers, whereas the bigger ground-based interceptor can achieve an altitude of maybe 12 or 13,000 kilometers. So this could, which brings us to the problem of anti-satellite capabilities from the surface of the Earth. So how would this satellite system, this constellation of satellites work? Let's go to slide 16. What I've shown here is 4 locations of a 400-kilometer altitude satellite battle station that contains an interceptor. The leftmost green circle with a red in the beginning shows you the location of this satellite at the time of the launch of an ICBM, which you can see on the right side. It's this cyan bluish colored ICBM trajectory on the lower right, extreme right, shows you the trajectory of an ICBM. When that ICBM is just launched, that is when a satellite deep in space would observe the launch of an ICBM. So it might take 20 or 30 seconds for the satellite deep in space to get a rough estimate of where the ICBM is going, so you can launch an interceptor from the satellite. So the next green circle to the right of the red one shows you the launch point, you know, where the satellite is when the interceptor is launched. 70 or 80 seconds, you look at the middle green circle, and you can see that the 5 kilometer per second interceptor has gone a significant distance. And in the next 70 or 80 seconds, maybe 160 to 170 seconds after the initial launch of the interceptor, you can see a postulated intercept. And you see the yellow, the red circle with the yellow filling. That's kind of the area that can, where intercepts of ICBMs can occur. So if we go to the next slide, slide 17, I can show you, here are 288 satellites in orbit, and the blue, flat blue circular areas show you the ultimate reach of a satellite. If you look on the right side, the right image of the two images, in the upper left corner, you see a slightly curved arrow, which has a circular, a white circle at one end and an arrow at the other end. And then underneath it, you see an icon of an explosion. So that shows you the initial, the circular region shows you the initial location of the satellite. And then the icon of the explosion shows you where the actual intercept would occur. So, Gary, if you show the video.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yep, here we go. By the way, Danny lost power. That's why he's not here right this second. Hopefully he'll get power back. I just wanted to give you a heads up, that's all. Yeah, let's look at this video.
Okay, so the video is just showing you the motion of these satellites. Now, these satellites, there are only 288 of them in this particular depiction because it gets too cluttered. You would need like 1,500 of these satellites to be able to engage a single ICBM launching from the surface of the Earth, anywhere from the surface of the Earth. So if you would, so if an adversary were to launch 10 or 15, let's say 10 clustered launch of 10 ICBMs, they could be tens of kilometers, 50 kilometers apart, but the cluster is within one of those circles, then you would need 10 or 15 more satellites in a location to engage them. So instead of using 15 satellites, instead of 1,500 satellites in orbit, you would need 15,000 satellites in orbit. And if you wanted to engage an ICBM field, which is well within the circular areas shown, you'd have to be able to engage, let's say, 100 ICBMs being launched. Actually, it would be several hundred. Well, 100 ICBMs being launched you'd need 150,000 or 200,000 satellites in space. So you're talking about
isn't that math is just it's crazy. It's out of this world. Is there any way? I mean, could you even set up a computer system program that could operate that? I mean, even with AI,
to launch the mass into space, just to launch, if the mass were just rocks, if it was just rocks, it wasn't satellites.
Right.
You'd have to. It would cost you about $4 or $5 trillion just to launch empty things into space. That much mass. Now, instead of but each launch, each launch has to be a satellite. Those satellites are going to weigh a couple of tons. Each satellite with an intercept is going to weigh a couple of tons, and so the launch weight alone will cost you $3 or $4 trillion. And then if these satellites cost as much as the cost of the launch, which is not going to be true, you're talking about 8 or 10 or $12 trillion. But if they cost 10 times as much as the launch, which is a more realistic number, you're talking about 40, 50, $100 trillion. It's ridiculous.
Ted, what could they possibly be telling Hegseth? I could see maybe they're not telling Trump, but Hegseth too, and I guess on down the line, telling him that he could possibly go out and say what he's saying.
Well, he's got to be lying. I mean, or he's so intellectually limited that it's
right.
It's hard to believe he can walk and chew gum. But this is a lie. This is invented to satisfy a political base that wants to see missile defense. $175 billion is nothing. I mean, it's nothing. You can't do anything with it.
Right, to pull anything like this off.
Yeah. And so what they're going to do is they're going to basically piss away $175 billion of U.S. treasure, of national treasure, to try to make it look like they're actually doing something. And for sure, you will have nothing. I mean, right? I mean, it's as sure as the sun will rise tomorrow that you will have nothing for this $175 billion. Well, you'll have a lot of defense contractors who will be a lot richer.
Right.
A lot of generals who will retire and get into these jobs in the defense industry. Yeah. And the nation will be ill-served by all these people and all these corporate entities.
But they'll be able to carry the charade on for as long as they need to, certainly at least as long as this administration is in office, right?
Well, at some point, the American people have to take responsibility for what they're allowing.
Right. Well, but I mean, honestly, though, the people aren't going to know. I mean, I was in the future combat systems, and I saw this firsthand. Yeah. They just didn't know until the thing ended up canceled. They believed all the hype. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. We actually have another show in just a few minutes to go.
Okay. Well, I'll let you go.
Jump off of
that.
I'm
another hour wasted with Ted Postol.
Hardly, Ted. You're great. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you.
We'll stay in touch. We'll talk soon.
I hope I've added to your misery, but I know you have a lot of misery.
Absolutely fabulous show. Really appreciate all this.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Ted.
Bye-bye.